Have you ever noticed sometimes that we don't see what's right in front of us? We can come to the holy days of God and never notice that we may have the cart before the horse, that we're missing the most important parts, even with the best intentions. Here's a little story that demonstrates how we can miss the obvious. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson are out camping in the hills one bright, starry night. They set up their tent, they put the sleeping bags in the tent, they crawl in, bring the flap down, and go to sleep. And halfway through the night, Holmes wakes up Dr. Watson and says, "Watson, what do you see?" And Watson says, "Well, Holmes, I see the moon, of course, and the constellation of Orion, and the Big Dipper." And Holmes says, "Watson, you idiot, someone's stolen our tent." We keep the festival each year, and we can end up focusing so much on what we think is our part in putting out sin that we can lose sight of our true Savior and his job. We can fail to see, for lack of a better word, the truth. First of all, realize that in any message that we hear, we never get the whole picture. We're only getting pieces of the whole. There's never enough time to cover everything. And so it is with this message. We all, each of us, have a part to play in God's plan in putting out sin, whatever that may be in our lives. But in the process, we can too easily forget whose job it is to deliver us out of sin, to lead us out of sin and into the promised land of God's kingdom. We have one Savior, one high priest, and that isn't us. All the stories and analogies in the Old Testament record highlight the fact that while we always need to follow, it's God through Christ who's made all this possible. And he alone gives us the deliverance that we so desperately need. That, especially this week, is where our main focus needs to be, not on ourselves. After all, if we concentrate mostly on ourselves, we can become our own creation and fall into the old joke that the problem with a self-made man is that he always worships his creator. One way to put these days into perspective is to draw an obvious analogy. For a few moments, let's put ourselves into the place of ancient Israel once God sent Moses to them, as we read in the book of Exodus. This is part of what we review this time of year, isn't it? There are reasons why that example is in the book. So let's cast ourselves as ancient Israel at that time and ask a few questions. Did you guide your people into Egypt in the first place so they'd be set up for deliverance, needing a Savior? Did you prepare the right man to be sent as an agent of God, to challenge Pharaoh and his authority? Did you send the plagues on the land to compel the Egyptians to release you? Did you guide the people from the land and out of that slavery? Did you open the sea, make it possible for your people to escape and drown your enemies along the way? Did you establish a supernatural pillar of fire and cloud to guide your people in the wilderness? Did you supply the food and water your people needed for all those years? Did you make sure that their clothes wouldn't wear out along the way? And in the end, did you bring them finally to that promised land? You didn't? You didn't do any of that? Really? Let's update the questions. Did you affect your calling of God? Did you open the words of the Bible so that you'd understand them, so that you'd know where to change and what to change? Did you earn God's Spirit? Did you forgive your own sins? Will you someday resurrect yourself? Will your power open the door into that realm of eternity that God has promised? Perhaps those questions need to be asked. After all of the holy days point to what the Father is doing through Jesus Christ, either what has been done in the Passover, what is being done in the spring holy days, or what will be done in the fall holy days. So why, pray tell, should our main focus ever be on our own efforts, on ourselves? Why do we get into that mentality? Probably lots of reasons, but part of the answer is worldly, and part of it's from the Scriptures, though usually taken out of context. And in the Bible, everything is context. The worldly explanation is the easiest. We like to think we have more power than we do. That's human. Especially in Western society, we're bred to believe that we are the masters of our destiny. To find out that someone else is in overall control is something our human nature has a hard time quite facing. Romans 8, verse 7 says that our natural mind is opposed to God, which includes his ultimate control of our lives, our ultimate destiny. Much better to think about how our efforts can achieve this or gain that. And in truth, humanly, just humanly speaking, we can accomplish a lot, that's obvious. And that focus can be aided and abetted by the Scriptures themselves. We can reach for certain Scriptures that actually do stress our need for obedience, self-discipline, and so forth. And it's all true. But that very thing can allow us to conveniently forget all the other Scriptures that point out beyond any doubt that we are the clay and the eternal is the master potter, shaping us into his children as he sees fit. That is his work. He alone is the Savior. He alone guides us to himself. And if we're privileged enough to wake up in that first resurrection, we'll know for all eternity that it was his love and mercy that got us there. Our efforts will be acknowledged by God if he can say to us, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And that's a goal we're seeking every day. But it's not our salvation. He is our salvation, just as he was for ancient Israel. And like ancient Israel, we need to keep following that pillar of fire and smoke, our Savior guiding us in the wilderness, so we can know the way to that true promised land. Because in the end, as I said, and the Bible emphasizes, it's our God that makes it all possible. Philippians 2, verse 13 reminds us, it's God who works in you to will and to do of his good pleasure. How his control and our free choice all work together to the same end really isn't fully explained. We don't truly understand the mechanism, but somehow both are true. Yet, everything goes back to him. Everything. And in the end, everything will work to his glory and honor. The first chapter of 1 Peter is a good read on this subject. We absolutely have our part, but his part is getting us there, and he promises nothing less. Despite all their corruption, God still made good on his promise and got the family of Israel to the promised land. How much more his spiritual children? That's where our hope and confidence needs to be, in him, every step of the way. The reality that he is in ultimate control and is guiding us to that amazing final outcome should be the greatest comfort in our lives, no matter what this life throws at us. Look at the people in the Bible, including Israel coming out of Egypt. No matter our weaknesses, our Father will still make his promises work for us. He'll still get us where we need to be. We talk about putting out the leaven, used as a symbol of sin at this time of year, and that's fine, and as it should be. As long as we remember that it's God himself through Jesus whose job it is to unleaven us, to purify and mold us, to correct us, to lead us, and ultimately perfect us in his image. Paul reminded us that our concentration needs to be on the spiritual, not the physical. When he said in 1 Corinthians 5, verse 8, let's keep the feast not with the old leaven, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. It's always the spiritual side of it that matters, because that's where we're going. All the symbolism will be left behind someday when the spiritual reality arrives. Jesus said that he was the bread of life, the perfect food from heaven. And when we eat that unleavened bread during this week, we need to keep that in mind and all it means, because part of the picture is obviously whether or not we choose to leave that old nature behind and cling to the Savior we've been given, whether we choose the ways and the thoughts of the eternal God, or whether we choose to hold to our own. But never forgetting that it's God who is changing us from the inside out through this daily, ongoing process we call life. That bread during this week is there to remind us that we are being made into that perfect, unleavened creature, that imitation of Christ, into the perfect sons and daughters of our Father in heaven.